advertisers of this station.
Right now on Word Radio, Green is the New Black, a special Eco-Word panel discussion presented in partnership with the From the Source Collaborative and supported by the Lenfest Institute and William Penn Foundation, part of Word Founders Day. Watch live right now on Word TV via Facebook. Featuring Tommy Joshua of the North Philly Peace Park, Janine Kayembe Oro of Holistic Art, and Daryl Addison of Torpedo Pod. And now, your moderator, Word host, Charles Ellison.
WURD family. All right, welcome. Good morning and happy Founders Day to the entire WURD family. And for those now finding out about WURD in Greater Philly, Delaware Valley, and across the nation, welcome to Founders Day and welcome to a special Eco-Word panel. This is our Green is the New Black panel, Founders in the Green Economy. I'm Charles Ellison, normally host, executive producer of Reality Check, your daily dose of public affairs here on WURD, but we have special happy Founders Day programming today. It's Founders Day. We're really excited about that. We really appreciate everyone tuning in, and we're very excited about bringing these special conversations and panels to you today. So many of you are watching us on Word TV, on Facebook Live. You're seeing us, the panel, this upcoming Eco-Word Green is the New Black panel in real time, in real visual. So we appreciate that. Many of you are listening in through 96.1 FM, 900 AM, wordradio.com as well, and also through your Word app. I want to also extend a thank you, a word of gratitude to the Source Collaborative, and that's being supported by the Lenfest Institute and William Penn Foundation. So I want to thank our supporters, those who are making this possible, making this production and this conversation possible today. So let's introduce our panelists and let's get this conversation going. We have joining us in Zoom, in this Zoom environment, Brother Tommy Joshua. He's founder, executive director of the Philly Peace Park, and it has ecology campuses in both North and West Philly. And he's also CEO of Green Wall Street LLC. That's an environmental innovation firm. His work focuses on land reclamation and the building of new Black communities. Also, Janine Kayembe is project manager for Eco-Word, our environmental justice journalism project. Go to ecoword.com for more there. She's also an autonomous community designer and fellow at holistic.art, where her work is creating experiences in art that speaks to how Black and brown queer people survive in a time of environmental justice. Also, Daryl Addison, founder, CEO of Torpedo Pod, torpedopod.com for more there, a fairly new rapid urban farming and gardening technology. Check it out, torpedopod.com. He's been focused quite a bit lately on how we scale up food sovereignty, how we tackle combat food insecurity, particularly in our communities. And Brandy Calander is a principal with the Robin Group. I hope I pronounced that correctly, Brandy. Also formerly serving as a Deputy Assistant Secretary at the U.S. Department of the Interior during the Obama administration. Also, she was Deputy General Counsel for the White House Council on Environmental Quality, where she led strategic initiatives and provided counsel on matters ranging from ethics to the National Environmental Policy Act. She's at B. Calander on Twitter. Hello to you all. Good morning. Really appreciate your time this morning. Brandy, I'm gonna start with you real quick because we're having like a big national moment about a lot of conversations, pandemic protests, the toxicity of the political environment. One of those topics that's coming up often that we're also seeing unfolding before us is the environment. And with your national experience in this space, let's start off with you. When you hear green economy, what are you thinking? What have you been thinking over the years? How are we describing that space? And in a time like this, can we really imagine it?
Yeah, so thank you, first of all, for bringing us all together and for giving us the opportunity to take advantage of your platform, quite frankly. I think it's so important that these are issues that we start to talk about more inclusively, quite frankly, Charles. I think this is a real opportunity to understand how these national issues hit home and have direct impacts on the way we live, the way we work, the way we play, all of it. So the first piece is, when you think about the green economy, why do you have to even call it that? I think we need to start there. And one of the things that I've experienced over the course of my career has been people value what they budget. If you have to pay for it, you value it. And if you really look at the tax codes for different countries, if you really look at the way we deal with environmental issues as a country, we're typically dealing with it as an afterthought. We're typically dealing with the negative externalities of things that we have not actually put the right infrastructure in place for to support. And then let's not forget that some of these entities that are designed to enforce and protect our natural resources, like the Environmental Protection Agency, Department of Interior, et cetera, EPA is something that came out of a Republican administration, only a few decades ago. And now under the current administration, you have a president who has done nothing short of gut it. So when you think about sort of the checks on the system and being able to understand why do we have to call it a green economy, you have to start with the fact that it's misplaced in the way we currently account for environmental issues. So I think breaking news, it's important for us to use Flint as an example. We have for years, 6 years, we have been watching people literally die because of poisonous water in Flint. And only last night did we sort of start to get word that there is money coming. It might be around $6,000 per person, so certainly not going to be enough to make folks completely whole, but it is finally a recognition that yes, we were wrong because it was pure neglect. But secondly, there are other cities around the country that are very similarly positioned and equally as vulnerable to continuing to give their children, their grandparents, themselves poisonous water because we have neglected the infrastructure to make sure that it's healthy and important. So it's just another reason to kind of reinforce why it's important that you're bringing us together to talk about the impacts on multiple levels. And I'll yield my time, but I really appreciate the important folks that you pulled together today. Thank you.
Yeah, Brandy, I appreciate that kickoff. Jenny, and I want to go to you about how you're thinking on or imagining that, and I appreciate you saying that too, Brandy. That's a very significant kind of asterisk to that conversation, whether we call it green economy or not. And how do we imagine that, right, Janine? So especially in that creative space, it starts with the vision board and creatively sketching up ways the community leverages existing spaces, properly cares for the green spaces, and creates opportunity out of land, air, water. How do we do that? How do we go about that? So kind of shifting from that policy conversation to, crystallizing it in that creative space.
Yeah, and I think this definitely can speak to Tommy's work too, but right now my focus is Black land reclamation all over the country. We used to own billions of acres of land, which has now turned to millions. But I just saw families, 19 Black families just got together to buy 100 acres down in Georgia. And you have myself here for my community and my friends. I'm in Joshua Tree, California, and I'm building my own homestead. And I built that with my kids, with my family. We're off the grid. We run on solar. So we really have to think about this. And, if we can create ecosystems within our new now pods that we have to be in, it creates this closed, symbiotic ecology that is really, a next step on how we can look at ways that we can live in symbiosis, which means together with the land, with nature in this contemporary space. And I think a lot of folks, a lot of Black folks, and I know we have a lot of trauma from being on the land ancestrally, but I think that it is a very interesting and creative solution to, I don't think we should totally divest in cities, but I do think we need some sort of reclamation of land outside of cities to help build capital for Black people, to help build safer spaces for Black people in nature. so that we can continue down the path that our ancestors started, which was to be able to manifest whatever it is our families need, whether it be food, clean water, clean energy, and clean resources, whether it be money that's not attached to things that are so detrimental, like capitalism, and these other systems that are tearing our communities apart. So I think we have to be creative and kind of take that step out to see and push our boundaries on exactly how are we able to live more sustainably, because without us in its everyday practice, it will be really hard to recreate a system that is for us. So I think that, we have to get really creative. And I love the work that, North Philly Peace Park and other urban farmers around the country are doing, and farmers in general, because there is this reclamation of Black land, and our indigenous folks too are receiving their land. So once we are able to tend to the earth the way that our ancestors inherently taught us, then I think the earth will be a lot better off for us, which will then create better systems.
Yeah, Tommy, thank you, Janine. And Tommy, Philly Peace Park, talk a little bit about that, about how it goes about that, how it goes towards creating that sustainable paradigm, right? How do we sell that sustainable paradigm to communities and places like where you have Philly Peace Parks in North Philly, where I grew up, in West Philly and elsewhere? People are thinking about the emergencies and the crises in front of them. So they may not be thinking of sustainability right away, but they need to, because that could probably save them in that moment of crisis. So how does Philly Peace Park go about that?
Okay, well, thank you. I think that to echo the previous panelists, this is the conversation that needs to be extended on a neighborhood level, right? This is a conversation that got to be extended to a household level. Like, this is that talk, right? You know how they say, well, you got to have that talk with your child in the African-American community? That talk today is about your environment, wherever you at, whether you're in the urban or southern. And if you're in Black skin, you have to be concerned about how can you secure resources, right? Because, white supremacy is the context that all of this is taking place in. And as Brandy was saying, and just to echo what she was saying, it's interesting that the same people, on white folks, talking about the green economy is also the same people who were talking about the prison economy, right? And I know, like, I've been around long enough to see when it was a .com economy, but we know what that meant for the Black community. The .com economy also coexisted with the explosion of the prison population and gentrification economy. So for the North Philly Peace Park, we try to get Black people to center themselves with ecology by understanding that their lives matter. You matter, no matter where you at, no matter what your class standing, no matter what your doctrine or orientation, your life matters, So developing and seeing the environment that's in our own neighborhoods as our ecological system, and looking at these things with new eyes, like, for the North Philly Peace Park, we've seen inside of the neighborhoods in Philadelphia, so much vacant land, right? So much vacant land. And when we looked at this vacant land, we've seen possible food sources. When we looked at this vacant land, we've seen possible places where we can construct new sustainable buildings. We've seen marketplaces where Black people can buy and sell and trade. Even when we studied the native habitat, we've seen mulberry trees, right? We've seen native herbs that can be processed and developed into an economic paradigm, So I think it's all about bringing this conversation, the one that we have in here, to every classroom, to every household, and to every block.
Talk to us, Daryl. Thank you for that, Tommy. Yeah, no, that's really important to think about, in terms of, you were saying we need to extend the conversation. I've always said that, extend the conversation, figuring out ways to make this a part of the Black zeitgeist, right? The Black pop culture conversation, that it comes as easily, it flows as smoothly as conversations about all, because we don't think of the environment as a traditional, sort of Black issue, right? But it is, but like, we're on the front lines of it. We're being impacted first and being hit the hardest. Daryl, let's talk about, scaling up, right? And kind of the mechanics of that so-called green economy. We've had some fascinating conversations about your innovation, Torpedo Pot. and finding ways we revolutionize not only becoming stewards of the environment or environmental method and technique, but somehow becoming owners of our own green and agricultural agency. One thing we're doing on Founders Day, for example, is we're celebrating the life and legacy of Dr. William P. Lomax Jr., and he stressed ownership. He also stressed ownership of spaces, our own Black ownership of land, of property, and expanding from there. So from the perspective of Torpedo Pot and your innovation, we talked a lot about, how we achieve green and agricultural agency, become suppliers and distributors. So from your vantage point, how do we achieve that?
Well, I think this discussion is the starting point for achieving that. But the second thing I want to bring out is that, Lomax embraced the moment. Mm-hmm. He was able to endure in all of this controversy. And he also used the capitalist system to build his ideas. I mean, he used what was available, the tools that was available. So he didn't run to a farm. He didn't isolate the Blacks that were in the cities. He somehow found a way to unite all of us and bring it together. And that's the Torpedo Pot, I believe, is that turning point. We're able right now. I'm growing outside probably close to about 1,000 peppers in 2 square feet. Mm-hmm. And so we have the ability to upscale and to grow like nobody's ever seen before. But I think part of that economic revival is what you're doing. I mean, I have to applaud you and all these great panelists that you have here, but because you're starting that conversation. We have no institution to start this conversation, to build this momentum. Each and every one of us have the same goals, and it may be expressed differently, but I mean, ultimately, we have one ultimate thing we're trying to achieve, and that's so we believe that with the food technology that we have now, that we can move into neighborhoods, and the land that, let me take it one step back here, the land that our fathers once had, I want you to think about it. We're in the technology space, so we're driving the technology. So the land that your fathers once had, it might be useless in the future. Because now we can produce more food in a smaller space, requiring less resources, less water, no fertilizers, and nobody's ever did that before. Mm-hmm. So what I don't want us to do is to go back to the same tools that Moses had when he was tilling his land, because we're using the same tools. And we need to look at working with these various groups, all of these, because these are our partners. The urban garden culture is a very fragmented culture. It doesn't produce income. People can't employ individuals. There's no technologies driving it, and that's where Torpedo Pot comes in. We're coming in with a technology that will drive these inner cities and develop new policies. For instance, the farming policy. The farming policy was developed for rural America. It's not developed for urban America. And Brandy, I would love to hear you talk about that, because those laws and everything else, we don't get incentives for building the food and building the inner city cultures using the same, producing even more food without technology. So we're looking at Torpedo Pot as being a really game changer. And the last thing I want to say is that we're not hogging it up trying to build infrastructure from a corporate infrastructure. We want to reach out to those community gardens. We want to reach out to Peace Park. We want to reach out to these organizations and show them that there is economic potential in what Torpedo Pot wants to drive to the inner cities.
Mm-hmm. If you're just now tuning in, we're now in a special Founders Day session, onWURD, Green is the New Black panel, Founders in the Green Economy. This is part of our special Founders Day programming. We are celebrating the life and legacy of Walter P. Lomax Jr., MD, philanthropist, physician, also founder of WURD Radio. And for more, go to WURDradio.com. I'm Charles Ellison. I'm hosting and moderating this panel this morning. You can also chime in at, or if you'd like to, go to hashtag for more in this conversation, hashtag onWURD. There's a little bit of clips or excerpts of this conversation at hashtag onWURD. We're joined by Tommy Joshua of North Philly or Philly Peace Park, Janine Kayembe, who is also project manager for onWURD.com, and she's also a fellow at holistic.art. You just heard Daryl Addison of Torpedo Pot and Brandy Calander is former Deputy General Counsel and Deputy Assistant Secretary during the Obama administration. We're doing this in partnership with the From the Source Collaborative, and this is supported by the Linfest Institute and William Penn Foundation. This conversation right here, EcoWord, green is the new black. Throwing this out to everyone. So how do we make that connection with the broader community? I know Tommy touched on that just a few moments ago. And also I heard Daryl kind of going there as well about how this relates to them, because, you know, particularly when we talk about techniques or strategies such as urban farming, when we talk about land reclamation, and we talk about that in the context of Black communities, about the experiences that Black folks have gone through for the past several hundred years. That's a very difficult and sometimes uncomfortable conversation to have. So do communities, particularly distressed communities like what we have in a place like Philly, get this, get what we're talking about right now? Do they get that there is this great opportunity on the green horizon? You know, and it's good when they see those opportunities manifest into the types of models and strategies that were deployed by Dr. Lomax, that when, you know, before he found radio, would let him to have the resources to create a word radio in the first place. But in terms of this broader conversation we're having about the environment, the green economy, how do we make it relate to them? Let's talk more about that. Brandy, I'll go back to you.
Yeah, so I think I want to pick up with sort of what Daryl was outlining, because there's a deep history in this country, you know, that I think we have our own narratives around. But one of the things that I learned a tremendous about when I was at the Department of the Interior was, number one, how much that agency makes for the country, right? So there are a lot of federal agencies that are really intended to be regulatory bodies and enforcement entities, and then others collect a lot of money through royalties for natural resources, like the Department of the Interior. And in order to do that, that means that people on the ground in local communities, from rural America to urban America, are doing things to extract resources for them to collect money from. So whether it's your ranchers or your coal miners, all of them are being supported by the federal government to be able to get a return on their investment. And there are structural systems around that I think we all can appreciate have huge pluses and huge drawbacks. But to Daryl's point, I think there is a complete deficiency in terms of the way we work and live these days in like these metropolises, and being able to properly incentivize people to be able to live off of their own resources versus being really codependent on these bigger structural systems that just have huge carbon footprints. And while, you know, when it comes to employment, the wages typically are low, right?
Wow.
One of the things, okay, I appreciate you. So one of the things that we are starting to see, in addition to sort of the leadership that you have, like, or convene today, are these things called green banks, right? Green banks are these constructs that are popping up in municipalities across the country to basically say, look, banking systems have not traditionally been willing to take the risk to create incentives around stormwater treatment or affordable housing in a scaled way with a lower carbon footprint by putting solar panels on the roof, for example. There are tons of different ways to do it, but green banks have cropped in. So I'm chairing the Green Bank in DC because I believe in this, and also because it's a way to make sure these projects get dispersed to the local community so that they get to experience the luxurious benefits of renewable energy in real time.
Mm-hmm. But how's that going? You know, particularly in a place like DC, and I know gentrification can be a real problem. So, I mean, is that green bank, or is that green bank model, is it really, as it's operating now, benefiting, like, especially those displaced, those vulnerable communities, especially in a place like DC?
It's a fair pushback. My bias, again, is that I chair the board, but our first project was in Ward 7, and it is putting solar panels on a community that has lots of members that are low income, like generational families. And I know this area extremely well. And so it was intentional that we are focused on inclusive prosperity. Our Mayor Muriel Bowser, is very committed to that. And I am, the board is. And again, you know, there's a bit of a nuance when you're dealing with green banks, because you of course need to do things at the commercial scale, because that helps continue to keep big flow of it's the feedback loop of the economy, right? It continues to allow big flows of money to pull through, but you have to do these things at the residential level as well, because people need to understand that this stuff works, right? You don't have the federal agencies being able to, in an orchestrated way, get folks these resources and incentives so that it's attainable for everyone. Then the municipalities have to come in and make sure that people on the ground really do start to feel it. So, you know, I cannot emphasize enough that it is important, and I really appreciate what Tommy was saying earlier, you matter. It is important that people understand that there is a place for them in the environmental sector, period, full stop. And having been a part of many large environmental organizations in one way or another, and appreciating the work that they do, but also appreciating that when it comes to inclusion, they have struggled. It's okay to break the mold and do something outside of those constructs to get good stuff done. So I think we have to really be thoughtful about asking for support, because these rural Americans that have mined coal, the farmers in rural America, they have been subsidized to support that work.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I would love to touch on that real quick, because, you know, this is Founders Day and we're supposed to be talking with Black founders. And myself, you know, I helped found a 3-acre urban farm in North Philadelphia when I was 19 years old. So over this past decade, it has been an amazing experience. And because of this exact topic is what made me leave my organization last year. So I had to get out of this struggle of having to fight for these resources for something that's so important. Urban farms in Philadelphia are responsible for 3 million pounds of food. And
wow.
To not be recognized, to not even receive a citation or anything, and to have to fight. And I'm going to be honest, at 21, I thought it was a game. I thought this nonprofit life was a game, that you gamble on writing these grants and that you have these competitors. And, you know, Tommy, I'm going to be honest, you guys were not too far from us, but when it comes to support and grants and things like that, at 21, I thought that these other folks that were doing the work were my competitors, which that created a down spiral for my career path as a Black queer person in this world trying to survive, as well as having other white, you know, we have a lot of environmental justice organizations or urban farms, and there's a lot of white people who are tied to this work that are writing the grants because they have the access. I was not able to write the grants for my organization at 21 because I was sleeping on Randstead and Walnut, and I didn't have a laptop, but my white counterpart did. So he was able to get the grants and get that recognition when I was the one creating the culture at the farm, bringing young Black people in with rap, with hip hop, with graffiti, with all of these different things that I was taught that bring community, that bring Black youth together, poetry. We had queer parties at the farm, but we had to create this alternative culture, and we're funneling in this money from all of these foundations who, you know, want to use our Blackness to gain more money for themselves and chip us off the little $5,000-$10,000. And here I am I was at 30 years old making $17,000 a year with a family of 5, running this urban farm that was giving, you know, the 23rd district so much praise, and oh, we have this urban farm and all of these cool things happen. But there was, you know, we would get $6,000 from the city. $6,000 pays one person for 6 months a living wage in Philadelphia. So it was really hard to play in that game. But then you're so connected to the earth, and you're so connected to your ancestors, you know, what they taught you on how to be on this land. And the fact that I had to equate money, because let's remember, we're talking about Dr. Lomax. That is a different type of class and different type of, you know, paycheck that you're getting to be able to fund these projects all over versus 19 and 20-year-olds taking on a project in the middle of North Philly with other North Philly residents and members who are all, I mean, just not even low income, impoverished. Yeah. And we're trying to do this good for the neighborhood. And there's, you know, you have to fight these big corporation nonprofits to get the money to do that. So I lost the will to be able to keep on going because of that.
Tommy, go ahead and offer some thoughts on that. And like, what's a better framework, right? What's a better framework where, you know, going back, you know, expounding on what Janine's saying and what Brandy was saying about how, like, hey, you know, folks like the coal miners and these farmers out in the Midwest, and what they get the government subsidies. So, you know, they've got the access. Janine saying how, like, white people in the environmental space, they got the access. How do we set up a better framework where, like, suddenly the kind of work that, say, like, for example, you do with Philly Peace Park, it has that access, or the work that Janine does, or the work that Daryl is doing with Torpedo Pot has that kind of access, gets that kind of funding and resources, that kind of support from the policymakers, the folks who not only in terms of the regulatory framework, but also in terms of, and I know a lot of city and state leaders don't want to hear this because we're in a pandemic and they're using the pandemic as an excuse not to fund things. They were already using excuses before the pandemic, but there's got to be a better framework to support that kind of work.
Yes, well, thank you, man. And I want to say that, Janine, you're speaking to my heart. Like, I really salute you and the awesome work that you continue to do. You know what I'm saying? You hit it right on the head. And I love everything everybody is saying. I you know, I got to take it back to white supremacy, right? I have to, right? Because that's in the context that us as melanated people have to always remember that's the game. The game that she spoke of is the game of white supremacy. And in this game, you are always given fish. You are never taught to be a fisherman or a fisherwoman, right? So the issues of equity, how can African Americans establish equity, ownership, control, agency through generations is always the question. And what we have found at the North Philly Peace Park, not only by studying our own history, is that we get what we organize for. We get what we organize for, we control what we secure, we achieve what we can envision. So we have really seen that a community organizing model, right, which is going back to type of a low technology. If you look at Trump, right, Trump achieved his victory through community organizing. I watched his town halls, right? I watched his travels through small little towns in rural white America. And I seen the parade of people who he around him, right? People who are definitely like hideous to us, but he were empowering working class white people. He was allowing their representation in his organizations. He was allowing their issues to be heard. He was creating a grassroots infrastructure. What we have to look at and have to go back to, regardless if it's an entrepreneurial model, whether it's a urban garden model or a rural model of community organizing. So at the North Philly Peace Park, we strongly believe in doing the day-to-day work of being in the distressed, marginalized communities, day in, day out, living among our people, building ties with our people, having extreme care and intentionality in how we deal with them, to build up their self-esteem, to build up their consciousness, and actually build a machine, an organization that has the perspective of bird in the hand, right? Bird in the hand, not two in the bush. We don't want these promises about what's going to come or what's going to trickle down to us. What we want and what we need in our community right now is we need an immediate program for economic recovery, an immediate program for food security, an immediate program to educate our K-20 population, and an immediate program for security. And all of that can certainly be centered on the land. And us, as far as us as urban farmers, we have to definitely, to echo what everybody else is saying, we have to break from the perspective that we are just engaged in the green, or we just engage in environmental. Yeah, of course it's environmental, but it's environmental on steroids. We are engaged in a revolutionary struggle for the freedom and liberation of our people. The struggle that we are engaged in is about power, which is a human right. It's about power to control our own destiny. We want ownership and control and determination where we are at. And only we can bring that to us, because we live in a system fundamentally that has a lack of love for Black people. So just to summarize, Brother Charles, we have to go back to community organizing. We have to go back to bird in the hand, building structures on a grassroots level, not structures that want to be isolated, not structures that want to be small scale, but structures that can build out from the block all the way up into the 22nd, 23rd, 24th, 25th century.
Daryl, jump in on this conversation too, and we've talked before about how, which is going to be very tough in this pandemic environment, and even when we get into the recovery, it's going to be a long time from now, the recovery post-pandemic phase. Black businesses, trying to recover. We got about, certain statistics we see floating around about 40% of Black businesses now just sort of disappearing, right? As a result of the economic meltdown from pandemic. But how can that community organize around something like this? Businesses like Torpedo Pot and other efforts in Black-owned business that are still soldiering through pandemic. How do we do that?
Yeah, I had a meeting with City Council last year. They came down to Philadelphia, to my location, and they saw what we were doing, and they took some of our technology down to the West Philadelphia Garden where we're growing food. I say that because, it's great to be recognized for doing something great. Lomax, of course, we're recognizing him for the greatness that he has instilled in us. I mean, we are a part of that seed. We're all that part of one community, as Tommy brought out. But the thing about it is that I think we need to understand the environment that we're in. It's great that you can have a garden. It's great that you want to feed people. But it's really in a bad backdrop, and I hate to use this word because but it's in a backdrop of capitalism. I mean, how do we now make money off of these gardens? How do we create jobs and income off of these gardens? And, there's a saying, if you're doing the same thing and you're getting the same results, you need to really take a look at your process and see if it's achieving its goals. So what I'm asking is that we have a technology now. We did not have this before. It's good to have all of these ideas. They're so great. They're going to save a lot of people. They're going to feed a lot of people. But are they sustainable? Do they generate income? And so we need to augment the way we're looking at how we're doing business. So right now we have a product, and we didn't have it before. We don't own anything as a people. We don't have any major industries that we control. So we don't have that money coming in. All we are just good intentions and good thoughts and working at low wages, as a lot of your people brought out here. But the fact of the matter is now we have a growing solution that will grow more food and create jobs. We're opening up. We're working with in some states in the United States. We don't want to give out all of our secrets, but we're working through major community organizations, and we're making them our distributors and the sellers of our products. And this, within the community, we believe we can go to Wall Street with our products because there's nobody else in the world that has the products that we have that can grow as much food. We grow more food than hydroponics, traditional gardening, all of that combined. We wipe everybody out. But we believe that our business model is to drive it down to the communities, because these communities are the ones that need it the most. And we believe that food, I was speaking to the governor of the state of Pennsylvania, that the food is we believe is the most successful way to go down and to go in Tommy's community and say, hey, listen, you want to grow food? Here are 15 or 20 torpedo pots. If you have 8 to 10 torpedo pots just from one person, you won't have to go to the supermarket anymore because it grows your food. You can do 3 or 4 crops a year. You will never, ever have to go back. And the seeds you're getting from it, Tommy, I like to bring out, you can sell the seeds on the open marketplace. So this is true sustainability. The new technology is bringing about the new sustainability. And I am so happy because it will meet so many different needs and change so many different policies. If you don't know about Torpedo Pot, you need to go to the website and find out more about it. But our goal is to what you talked about, Charles, is that we know right now we're opening up a store in West Philadelphia that will be selling our products and services. And just standing there, setting them up for displays, people were coming by. What is this, Mr. Addison? What is this, Mr. Addison? And I said, you know what it is? It's an opportunity for you to make money. It's an opportunity to create jobs. And so giving us that opportunity, go ahead, Brandon, you're going to say something.
I want to, I feel like there's a tension, between capitalism and breaking the mold, right? That's a real tension. We've seen that play out in our election this year. We have hopefully now all come together to see that there are two clear choices. We'll see where we net out, right? But I do feel like, you know, Janine, you said something that struck me earlier, and I tend to call it, you use different words, but what I call it is the pioneer tax. And it's essentially when you are doing something that no one else has done before, and it's lonely, and it's taxing, and it's exhausting, and you don't get praised for it. And I think of like Shirley Chisholm, she won't ever get to see Kamala for, you know, all the charges around, all the things aside. Like, it is a moment where you don't get to see the fruits of your labor. They don't totally yield perhaps in your lifetime. But nonetheless, to Tommy's point, not only do you matter, but you really are starting to make the way for other people to see that you can be in those spaces, right? And so my sincere hope is that the work that I've done in like environmental nonprofits and the work that I do even now with funders, right? Like, that will be opportunity for organizations like yours in the future to be recognized by people who are brown or who have more of a sensitivity around the need to include people who are brown and fund them accordingly so that they can do tenfold what took you 10 years to do, right? And I think, you know, to Daryl's point, it is absolutely essential that we scale from a capitalism perspective, because that is the game. And there's nothing wrong, I personally believe, there's nothing wrong with making money, but more importantly, there's absolutely something wrong with being shut out. And there is an implicit bias in our ability to be able to fully scale in the capitalistic structure that we currently have right now. And, you know, one of the things that we do at the Raven Group, it's a separate entity called the Diverse Asset Managers Initiative, and it's really designed to focus on how you can really create more inclusion in the financial services industry. So you've seen in like asset management, the environmental social governance movement, there's a full appreciation, and a lot of people are making good money on this appreciation, that we have to do things more sustainably. Well, we want Torpedo Pot and other entities to be wrapped and bundled into moving that market forward and be able to get the benefits from that, right? We want to commoditize some of these urban farms so that people get paid for doing that good work. They're farming with the other farmers. And I just want to just kind of affirm you, Janine, in understanding that you've paid that tax, and we see you. You know what I mean? I just want you to know that we see you.
Real quick, I want to acknowledge our partners. Thank you for that, Brandy. Real quick, I want to acknowledge our partners, from the Source Collaborative, which is supported by the Linfest Institute and William Penn Foundation. They're making this special Founders Day EcoWord programming possible. EcoWord, green is the new black, founders in the new economy. I'm Charles Ellison. I'm normally host, executive producer, creator of Reality Check. I'm moderating this EcoWord green economy panel this morning. Also, I do see some folks on our Facebook live stream. If you'd like to leave questions or comments, you'd like to chime in a little bit to this conversation, I'm watching you. You can do so in the comments section at Word TV and our Facebook live stream. Do that. Nicole Streets, I hear you, I see you. She says grassroots infrastructure is dope, and it's the answer. Not just talking, but about being out in our community, in the masses. Also, Nicole Streets saying, this is our land. We have to go back to our naturalism and stop trying to become robots. That's that comment. You can also email me, celison@wordradio.com, or I'm on Twitter @EllisonReport. #EcoWord. Happy Founders Day, everyone. Founders Day, as you know, we're doing special all-day programming. We're celebrating the life, the legacy, the times of Walter P. Lomax Jr., MD, our founder of WURD Radio. And he was one of those early pioneers of the green economy and a lot of the issues and topics that we're talking about today. A little bit later on, continue to stay dialed in, tuned in to our special Founders Day coverage, because after this panel, we've got a Black Women, Black Power, exploring the 100th anniversary of the women's right to vote. That'll be coming up a little bit later on here on WURD as part of our special Founders Day programming. That's being hosted by the Source's Andrea Lawful Sanders. It's going to be a collection of Black women elected officials, city and state elected officials. So that's coming up a little bit later on. And another Lomax Legacy panel at 1 p.m. about entrepreneurship. We are talking about entrepreneurship and Black innovation, and that's the Founders Circle. The question there is, can Philly's tech economy create Black wealth? So it's going to be a very interesting panel. Definitely you want to tune in to that as well. I want to also give a special shout out and thank you to our sponsors: Pico, Comcast, NBC Universal, Brown ShopRite, Dietz and Watson, Amoroso's, Hers, and Canada Dry. Thank you for making this all possible. Also, real quick, don't forget, go to wordradio.com. Register for Founders Day today so you're eligible to win prizes and special giveaways throughout the day, throughout the course of our special programming up until 9 p.m. So definitely do that. And there's a special Founders Day discount for your 4WORD membership. If you haven't done this now, you got all day to do it. Special Founders Day discount for 4WORD membership. That is now $80 today. It's a discounted price of $80. It's normally $90 for your 4WORD membership. So join or renew on Founders Day. What better day to renew your 4WORD membership or to start your new 4WORD membership for yourself or for your family and friends than today? Do that now. So let's go back to our panel. Once again, I want to recognize, want to introduce to you again, if you're just now tuning in, Brother Tommy Joshua, founder, executive director of Philly Peace Park; Janine Kayembe, project manager for ecoword.com, community designer and fellow at holistic.art; Daryl Addison, founder, CEO of Torpedo Pot. Go to torpedopot.com for more there. And Brandy Calander, principal with the Raven Group and formerly a deputy assistant secretary at the U.S. Department of Interior during the Obama administration. Brandy, you had talked about that you noticed the tension there. I noticed that tension. There's tension in terms of I always highlight this because I think we need to fix it. There is this tension and disconnect between the grassroots, a lot of what we're talking about here today, and the grass tops. We obviously don't have any elected officials on this conversation, but that's real important. Like, that connection has to be there, particularly when we're talking about the Black community. We were at a time, before the Voting Rights Act of 1965, it was barely a few hundred Black elected officials. Now they're like 13,000 city and state and federal today. But there's this disconnect that's there within our community between the grass tops, the influencers, the policymakers, and the grassroots. We got to reconnect that. We got to figure out ways in which grassroots can leverage what grass tops is doing, because grass tops has an obligation to make that happen, to make those things happen, to make dreams like Philly Peace Park, or what Janine is doing, or what Daryl is doing happening. And the grassroots can power all of that. How do we reconnect? How do we fix that?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that distinction. It really is, it's material, Charles. It makes a difference because there are resources at play. And what I would say is I have noticed a shift. There are foundations that are starting to create more accountability with some of these larger environmental organizations to say, we're really going to be looking to see and hold you accountable for making sure you're pulling in more diversity when it comes to dealing with climate change. Like, if you're serious about climate change, you've got to be able to reach all demographics. And if you can't do that, or have traditionally had a hard time doing that, we are going to help you understand that you're going to have to make deeper investments in folks. So the brass tacks is, we've got to start making deeper investments in Black and Brown America, period, full stop. If you are not serious about doing that, you will not reach those demographics. And it's not just Brown and Black folks. I'm going to be, perhaps a bit of a fiery beacon on this, but one of the benefits of my experience at Interior was I spent a ton of time in coal mines across the country. Those folks are hurting too. And I will be very candid in saying this administration has done them no favors. Mitch McConnell has done them no favors. They are depleted of resources when it comes to figuring out a future and how to economically pivot. They don't have an industry to turn to. There was one hustle in many of the sort of Rust Belt states, and that was coal, and that's gone. So, and that's gone, to be clear, because natural gas has beat the brakes off of that. And now we're looking to shift from natural gas to renewables, right? So let's deal with the fact that you've got brothers and sisters at the Arctic Circle, right? You've got folks in Barrow who live off of the ocean they refer to as their garden. They have to move every few years because of sea rises, because of climate change, right? Having gone and sat with these people, and you realize how deficient we are in being able to help them, where they have to literally be climate refugees and move around, you realize we are not actually figuring out how to solve the problem because we're not including the people who actually know what's happening on the ground. And so I would just say that gap between grassroots and grass tops, Charles, is exactly why we have got to be more inclusive in addressing these issues.
Yeah, you know, Tommy, I want you to address that too, because like what you do with Philly Peace Park, right, in North and West Philly, I feel like those activities there, or the activities that like Janine is engaged in with urban farm, a lot of those activities there, like, so for example, in Philly right now, Philly second highest homicide rate of big cities in the United States. Everyone's scrambling around trying to figure out, okay, what do we do? What do we do about the young people? You know, there's all kinds of hearings and conversations, whether it's you know, City Hall holding something, or it's, you know, us having those conversations all day on WURD. What do we do? Everybody's scratching their heads. It's like, well, you know, we've got all these different activities, like, you know, urban farming, or, you know, trying to keep young people engaged through educating them about the environment, the space that they live in, the habitat that they live in, how to improve that, make that better. I just remember just growing up in North Philly, and there was just a lot of emphasis, at least on my block, on keeping that block, as, I mean, we didn't have a whole lot, but, you know, keeping that block clean, you know, and engaging in kind of little micro, you know, little parts of land. You know, sort of, there were their own sort of special land reclamation projects, if you will. And so, you know, how do we expand that, you know, or health and wellness, you know, some of the services that you provide through, like, you know, yoga classes, you know, keeping young people engaged like that. That's the kind of stuff we don't seem to like talk enough about. How do we plan to expand those sorts of activities, scale them in such a way that can actually be the answer to a lot of these crises that we're faced with in a city like Philly today?
Yeah, absolutely, Charles. And one of the things that really is coming out, and I love the questions and I love everything everybody is saying, because even though we may be attacking the problem from different perspectives, all of those perspectives are valid. All of them is valid. And it shows the need for a Black united front around these issues. And I think that we may all agree that land ownership, knowledge of how to go into the land and bring wealth, and also the sophistication and the vision of what we want to scale out, we can all agree that we need a land-based solution. We feel just like Sister Janine feel. Yeah, we went through the same exact thing of just seeing the architecture of how it was difficult for us as land-based community organizers to get the resources to navigate a system that seemed to be set up against us. And that's the reason why I formed Green Wall Street. I formed Green Wall Street because it was damn near impossible for a Black nonprofit to get any type of sustainable funding. And I knew that we had to create a way to commodify our work so that we can create jobs, right? But then also too, I think what Brandy is saying, right? So you got the spirit of what Janine is saying, and the knowledge of policy that Brandy brings to the table, and the entrepreneur acumen of Brother Daryl, because Daryl, I promise you, we're going to buy some of those. We're going to do business, brother, because we need that in our community, right? But to go back to your question, Charles, it's absolutely important. Now, this is the thing about what we do in the community. We activate the soul of Black people, Brother Charles, which is the most important thing. We show Black people that they matter by giving them, or not giving them, but going with them towards power and self-determination, even if it's on those little blocks or them little parcels of land that you spoke of, that you came up on, right? The thing that the Black people need, we need equity, we need some ownership. Even if it's on a block, we need a situation where we are loved, where we are valued, where somebody can put tools in our hands, where somebody like Daryl can come and show us how we can actually create wealth from a box, where somebody like Janine can come and tell us like, hey, what y'all doing here is a lot more land for y'all, and there's a lot more world out here. We need the lived experience of human rights. We need the lived experience of peace. Now, and this is why this, you know, on a grassroots level, this work must be elevated. Black communities must be empowered. We have to be in control. We have to have psychological and spiritual agency. And we absolutely believe that this can be the solution. And in conclusion, I just want to say that one of the things that spawned out of what we do on the land at the North Philly Peace Park, not only is we working as Brother Daryl to develop a new sustainable economy, we encourage everybody in our neighborhood. We had a challenge to the neighborhood. Who can form businesses from the community garden? People came back doing candles. People came back doing tinctures. People came back making jams, and we got apple trees, so people now make apple juice, right? So the question is this: how can empowerment be sustained? How can we have a united front? How can each and every one of us that's on this discussion right now meet again, like we are right now, to really figure out how we can have a target, intentional tackling of the issues, brother? Yeah. I just want to say that. And I just want to say I'm just so appreciative for this conversation. But we need more organizing on the grassroots level, and we need more collaboration among folks like the That's right.
That's right. That's what we're trying to do with, as an ongoing project with ecoword.com. Janine, I want you to jump in here. I want you to also address the sort of green imperative or the sustainability imperative. Does this become more urgent? Because, okay, let's take, you know, Philly is a great case study. I know there's a lot of people who are watching it from around the nation. Philly's our core audience, but Philly's a great case study in the sense that, like a lot of the flooding we've been dealing with lately, I knew that was coming. That was going to be a big crisis. It's a quiet crisis, but it's there. Big flood zone. We got a trash crisis. We got an air quality crisis. Some of the highest asthma rates in the country. The air pollution. Folks keep on wanting to open up natural gas plants in places like Nicetown and Southwest Philly, talking about they want to go green, but contradicting themselves when they open up a brand new natural gas plant. I don't know, that's one of the biggest hustles of all time, natural gas. I don't understand how people fall for that gimmick. There's no such thing as a natural gas, but does that imperative become more urgent? People start, you know, communities start waking up and noticing like, hey, you know what, we've got to do something here. We've got to be not just sustainable in terms of lifestyle, but sustainable in terms of the projects we support, in terms of the type of activities we're engaged in, our young people are engaged in, the type of economy we want to be engaged in, we want to create jobs in. Janine?
Yeah, so I want to speak to 2 points. I definitely thank you, Tommy. Thank you, Brandy, again for that acknowledgement. And this might be a little bit of a Debbie Downer, but you spoke about urban farming and sustainability projects as a solution to neighborhood crises like homicide, like you know, education and things like that. But you have like, me and Tommy we're really in the trenches, right? Mm-hmm. Like in North Philadelphia, across from public housing, the streets have a grip on our children. Mm-hmm. And I didn't leave my organization from fatigue. I also left because I was robbed by one of our young people. And I didn't tell, and I was threatened my life to tell. Mm. So me being in proximity to the streets to uplift my community put me in proximity with the streets. So like Tommy said, we need help in the trenches. We need Black elder mentorship. Because me at 30, it's hard for me to mentor a 21-year-old, a 25-year-old. They don't respect me the same way. So for me, that comes to the bottom line, and this answers the second question, is we have all of these external environmental factors and crises that are happening that are oppressing Black people and people of color. But we can't address any of that until we address our community's mental health. Mm-hmm. And I spoke about this in the cannabis conversation of like, why are all these young kids smoking weed? It's because we have anxiety. It's because we have anxiety because our air is polluted, Our water is brown coming out of our faucets. We're eating oodles of noodles, and there's no job access. Everyone wants to be a rapper, basketball, football player, all of these different things. And we have to expand what the possibilities are. And I think we were able to do that. And I see the culture that Tommy's creating and the culture that I created and other urban farms in the city, Chris at Bartram's Garden. And it is definitely creating a lot of stewards of land. And it's also just a place for young Black, for Black youth to hang out in between their drug deals, in between their drive-bys. So people are still on the street, they just in the farm too. And I'm glad we can give them that safe space. But until y'all send therapists as reinforcements for people like myself and Tommy who are in the grassroots, then we can't unify. There's no way to, because there's no trust. And that's what, unraveling mental health issues, I think, is the root to how we will be able to save this environment, the world that our ancestors created, is when we are able to have that healing. And that's going to take, resources and non-conventional ways of thinking for folks to be able to deploy into these neighborhoods and start getting these young people and even adults therapy so that we can bridge that generational gap to then unlock the knowledge potential that we both have as young people and elders and everyone surrounded in between to answer and really to answer some of these questions and save our neighborhoods.
This is WURD Radio 96.1 FM, 900 AM. Also, WordRadio.com for the live stream, Word TV, and Word app, downloadable on your smartphone, tablet, device. Daryl, speak a little bit to that, because it's these strategies. Janine makes a very good point. These strategies, any of these strategies, whether we're talking about things such as the environment or green economy, or whether we're talking about our politics, the way we conduct or start our businesses through entrepreneurship and innovation, any of these conversations, they all have to be trauma informed when it comes to Black people. Because of the trauma. Just having this conversation earlier this morning with my wife about that trauma, particularly from slavery and some of the really ugly, horrific things that have happened over the past several hundred years. And that trauma still lives on today in a lot of our interactions and our families, our communities. Daryl, how do we push through that, and in the context of that green economy development?
Yeah, everyone on this call has been traumatized, but to some degree. But we look at the grass tops and we look at the grassroots. And I was sitting I used to teach at one point. I used to teach a young fellow in class, and he had ADD or whatever. He was just all over the place. And so I would try to get him to focus on something that was so pivotal to him, so I could draw him in, and I could give him the education that he deserved. And right now, there's so many things hitting the Black community that we have to find out what we can do to draw the attention of these Black entrepreneurs and bring them in, because they're traumatized. Janine is traumatized. Tommy is traumatized. Brandy deals with the policy. We all are traumatized. But the fact that when I looked at the situation, I asked myself, so with the trauma also comes education, and trauma goes hand in hand sometimes. And so I asked my clients, my entrepreneurs, would you rather continue to make the $60 a week that you've been making, or would you rather make $600 to $6,000 a week? And so what Torpedo Pot wants to do is to move into these areas and undo the trauma by setting real life goals, real objectives that are meaningful, so that these people can use these goals and objectives and see a rewarding experience in the back end. I think that's the beginning of trying to undo the trauma that we all have experienced. I think, if you look at our communities, we just simply don't, we have never taken advantage. We don't quite understand how to make money. And I think That's something we have to learn. That's part of the trauma, because we've been given so much stuff and contained in so small area that that's all we know. We probably have no clue what's happening in some of the other communities around the United States. We've probably never been there before. So for Torpedo Pod, our goal is to take these young entrepreneurs, the Janines and the Tommies and all the policymakers like Brandy, and to let them know that, you know what, this, in the city of Philadelphia, I had someone offer me $5 million for Torpedo Pod to work in the city of Philadelphia. And I said, well, why would I want to do that? The city of Philadelphia has $350 million located inside of it. There's $350 million market in Philly. And you need to find out if you want that market or you want to give it to somebody else. Mm-hmm. So that between that grassroots and that grass top is that mobilization that we need to do to bring all of this together. And so we know that it can be done. We did it in many businesses before. And I know it can be done in Philly, and I know it can be done with the Philadelphia residents all over the world. We're doing it right now. So we want to unite. We want to be able to help that mental health, but the mental health comes with, you know, giving some responsibility, showing them that you do care. You know, when somebody wins at an objective, they feel good about themselves. That's self-confidence, self-esteem. And knowing that you have a process that works there, and I'm going to close it out. Allison, Charles, just say this one last thing. When I look at rural farmers, they don't have master's degrees. A lot of them didn't go to school. But one thing they do know, they know when to put that seed in the ground, and they know when to add that fertilizer. So they know their self-esteem is based upon a business model. And that's what we need to do.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You know, one of the things real quick, you know, that WURD emphasizes quite a bit in its regular programming, and you're going to be hearing quite a bit of this, the audience, listeners, viewers, throughout the day, throughout our special Founders Day programming and broadcasting, is the theme of health and wellness. And one of Dr. Lomax's driving principles, this was sort of a core piece of his philosophy, was that you can't have or you can't realize economic empowerment without the health and wellness, right, Brandy? That, you know, so the way we have to operate, I mean, he was, you know, again, you know, one of the early pioneers of that, of recognizing that we're going to have to operate in a way that recognizes and that treats, or somehow creates some kind of infrastructure to treat that trauma, so then we can get to that point, our heads are clear, whether individually, household-wise, as a collective community, we cross that bridge to wealth creation, to prosperity, to full parity, because this is also a parity discussion. Brandy, I did want you to touch on real quick as far as, and I want to get to you, Janine, about that trauma-informed, you know, how I want to get your thoughts on that, particularly from the perspective of someone who's been in that policy space, that regulatory space, how recognizing and figuring out creative ways to address or tackle that trauma is important.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Thank you. And I you know, the brass taxes, there's a history in our country that is built on bondage. And we just continue to put Band-Aids on cancer. And that is at its core the trauma that we all absorb day in and day out. Whether you look at it as double consciousness, you know, sort of the W.E.B. Du Bois lens, whatever you're calling it, we're all naming it. We just have many, many names for it. And it's showing up in a way that I feel like I have to get out. So I apologize, I was interjecting before because Janine you say Debbie Downer, but you were speaking the facts about how climate implications are showing up. And there were recent studies, and this is personal for me as a mother of a 22-month-old and as a Black woman, and have lots of friends who have also had struggles with fertility. But you know, there are recent climate studies that show changes to pregnancy risk, and finally are showing the correlation between pregnancy risk and the disproportionate impact on Black women in particular. And so I'm talking about 52 studies, 32 million births looked at across the United States, and things like intense and increased humidity. That's climate. right? Things that we may not traditionally characterize as having a direct impact, they are absolutely having a direct impact. And so what happens when sort of you see this canary in the coal mine moment and it's impacting one demographic? It's just a litmus test for what can happen to all of us. To do the most natural thing, to be able to procreate, that is getting in the way. And I personally, not a medical doctor, but I personally want to just put a footnote here that the trauma that is unique to the Black experience, the Black American experience, is all bundled up in all of that, right? So how do we figure out how to deal with the mental health? I want to go back to Tommy's point. It's giving people something to grow, something to show that they are bringing it to life, right? You go to Daryl's point, it's setting clear objectives and metrics so you can look back on what you've done and you're not just spinning in trauma. And I do think you are going to have a very hard time getting future generations of Brown and Black Americans to feel like they can enter the environmental sector and scale it and become leaders in it if they feel like they can't get to the corner without getting hemmed up by someone who looks like them, someone who they know, right? So it is a matter of going back to the need to invest in Black and Brown America. And it does, you know, one would hope that that would come from equity in the federal taxes and state taxes that we pay in terms of distribution, more inclusion when it comes to capitalism and these structures. Yeah. But I think Daryl is a very good example of, despite that, and Lomax is obviously a pioneering example of, despite that, finding a way to carve out your space and pulling others in so that we can all gain and benefit and grow.
You know, I always like to say or reflect on how election winners are the ones who shape policy. Election losers just don't. They are essentially locked out. You know, because, you know, it's just kind of keeping it simple like that. And so I wonder, I was watching last night, Democratic National Convention, this ambitious rollout or presentation of this aggressive environmental and climate crisis mitigation plan. And then that was followed by, or that was tied to the historic official nomination of Kamala Harris, Senator Kamala Harris, as a major party's vice presidential candidate, first Black woman to be in that position. So I wonder if I want to get folks' thoughts on, I'll start with Janine, about how do you think that also starts to maybe move the needle forward on some of this on a much more kind of grander, broader scale? How do we also mobilize people politically around an issue like this, especially Black people and Black voters in particular, because Black people are the first, we are the first, and we are the hardest hit by things anti-environment, whether it's climate crisis, it's pollution, anti-environmental policy, the impacts of climate crisis that are started by people creating evil policy. So how do we get people mobilized around this? Because I know there's a lot of other things that we're getting mobilized around, from things like police violence to the state of the economy. But then, you know, there's environment, there's things green, like what we're talking about, and they're just as important, they're equally important. How do we mobilize around that? Well, we've got about 5 more minutes or so.
I mean, you know, Charles, politics is not my thing.
Yeah, no, I know. I just want to kind of see just how we mobilize, get everyone's thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. Like I said, you know, being in the grassroots, it is really hard to organize around larger topics in, you know, smaller local communities, because folks are just impacted so hard on the day to day. But something that I think, and even, you know, having an urban farm in North Philly for so long, what I saw really work were those local, you know, county elections with, you know, depends on your mayor, it depends on who's in your district, it depends on your state rep. You know, Malcolm Kenyatta was very generous and was able to see our value and value that with resources as soon as he got into office. You know, Daryl Clark definitely helped a little bit. So if you have, you know, political allies and those folks are well resourced, then that's a good way to mobilize the community, in my perspective, because the politicians are putting their money where their mouth is or where their wave is or whatever it is that, that they're doing. So I think, for me, it's hard to think about it on such a grand scale because I've been in such the smaller microcosm of the effects on climate change with Black people. So for me to, really think that continuously politicians have these promises about these different things. Obama, we were able to jumpstart our business though in that Obama administration because of all of the grants and things that were, and it was so easy to access money in that time. But after that, it became really, really hard. So there are definitely ways to mobilize people around resources, but I'm really going to stick to it's hard to think about it on such a grand scale when you're just, like I said, in the grassroots, in the trenches, and you see people are, they're still hungry no matter how much food you grow because, it's hard to offer a job. So without those really small state and city elections, it's hard for small nonprofit organizations trying to do the work without those allies. So,
we have to figure out too, and I like how you're illustrating that, Janine, because we have to figure out a way to make that grand, right? To make the like efforts like yours grand, right? To grow it. And Tommy, jump in here too on like how do we mobilize around it, particularly in a time like this. And I'm kind of closing up here because I got about several more minutes. But go ahead, Tommy.
Okay. Well, thank you. I really appreciate this discussion. This is the thing. COVID exposed a lot of stuff, right? COVID was almost like a long fall, right? A long winter where all the leaves were gone and you were able to see the branches and the trees and see everything for how it was.
Yeah.
So for the Philly Peace Park, it was all about organizing, right? We noticed that around April, May, it was us and the police in the neighborhood. That was the only two organizations that was actually on the ground. We were on the ground because we had to put season to the ground. The police was on the ground because they still had to respond to things that was going on. But what happened was, in this context, is that a program developed called the Peace Guard. And this was the brothers and sisters from the North Philly Peace Park who were therapists, who were educators, actually being called upon by neighbors to intervene in mental health crises, domestic violence, right? So that's a program that I want to raise up. I want to raise up the program of the Peace Guard, of brothers and sisters who were organizers at the park, coming from the land and actually intervening in the neighborhood. The other thing that I want to raise up is I want to raise up something called the Black Market. And this is now I want to invite everybody to come out to the North Philly Peace Park tomorrow. We are going to be featuring over 35 local Black businesses out on the land. Everything going to be socially distanced. But this is another program that is getting people involved in the issues, getting people mobilized. It's going to be at 22nd and Jefferson, Friday from 3 to 8, the Black Market. Please come out, support these Black businesses. Thirdly, I want to say this. Every box of food that we give out, we also give out information about voter registration. We gave out over 5,000 flyers educating people on how they can connect with online or mail-in voting, right? So I just want to highlight that on the land, as organizers, Black people that have control and equity that is invested in these neighborhoods, not only can we do a lot by way of food, but we can also serve the business community. We can serve the security and public safety of the neighborhoods, but we also can serve as a base to educate people about their voter rights and their democratic rights.
All right. I'm going to have to actually wrap it right there. I thank you, Tommy, for that. And hopefully we'll follow up, too, on getting people to take the census as well. Census is another big topic, but we'll that's for another later day, another bat time, another bat channel. So I appreciate you, Tommy. Josh, appreciate the work you're doing with Philly Peace Park, phillypeacepark.org for more information to find out more about him. He's been joining. You're going to get the last word, Tommy, on this special Founders Day programming. onWURD, Green is the New Black panel, Founders in the Green Economy. Also, you heard before him, Janine Kayembe, who is project manager for our environmental justice journalism project, onWURD, onWURD.com. She's also a fellow at holistic.art. You heard before that Brandy Calander, who is a principal at the Rabin Group, rabingroup.com, but she's also former deputy general counsel and former deputy assistant secretary at the Department of Interior and the White House Council on Environmental Quality during the Obama administration. She's been joining us here. And Daryl Addison, founder, CEO of Torpedo Pot, great new innovation. I'm real pleased to see how there might be some partnerships and synergy there between Torpedo Pot and Philly Peace Park. I love how we suddenly realized that that was real intentional. So looking forward to that, getting more news on that. But go to torpedopot.com for more information. Everyone, you've been listening in to our special Founders Day broadcast, our live all-day virtual Founders Day broadcast. We normally have this annual exercise in person. I'm really missing everyone. I'm always looking forward to those days when we meet in person at a major space of convening, and we hug and we show the community love. But we can't do that this year in person, obviously because of pandemic. We want everyone to keep safe, but that doesn't stop Founders Day. We're doing that all-day broadcast, all day virtually, all the way into 9 p.m. We've got more panels that are coming up. After this panel, we get into the Black Women, Black Power, exploring the 100th anniversary of the women's right to vote. I want to thank the partnership with the From the Source Collaborative, which is supported by the Linfest Institute and William Penn Foundation, which made this panel possible. Continue to go to wordradio.com for more information on Founders Day, and also for the special Founders Day onWURD membership discount of $80. Also, thank our Founders Day sponsors, Pico, Comcast, NBC Universal, Brown ShopRite, Dietz & Watson, Amoroso's, and Canada Dry. Also, thanks to the Knight Linfest News Transformation Fund, the Borealis Foundation, and Solutions Journalism Network for their support of our livelihood initiative. I want to thank our panelists for their time this morning, and thank everyone for listening in and viewing in as well. We're here on WURD Radio 96.1 FM, 900 AM, wordradio.com, Word TV, Word app. I'm Charles Ellison. Stay tuned. Founders Day. We'll be right back.